What's up, NBA fans? Dom2K on the mic, and today I'm here to take on the daunting task of finding out what makes an NBA player a superstar. The reason that this question is so hard to answer is because there's a crazy amount of blurred lines, there's so many different opinions, and people really argue about this all the time, and it's caused me to believe that, well, the answer to this question is just really unclear. If you were to go on and ask 100 different people this question, you would probably get 100 different answers, because I've seen lists that go pretty long and they include players like Lowry and DeRozan, and then I've seen lists as little as like 4 players where people say LeBron James, Curry, KD, and Westbrook are the only superstars. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to find out together what makes a player an NBA superstar through what I tell you guys in the video and through what you guys say in the comment section. So to start with, something that I found consistent among players that people like to call NBA superstars is they have to have at least one skill set that can take over a game, but it has to be on a consistent basis. This is the reason why I think so many players can get away with just being scorers but really not being able to do anything else, and still people will call them superstars, or at least a majority of the people will. But you see, this is where the lines already start to get really blurry, and this is why it's so hard to define what a superstar actually is. Take for instance Kyrie Irving. I feel like NBA fans are really split into 2 groups right now. There's the group that believes Kyrie Irving is an NBA superstar, and there's the group that is a little bit tougher and says no, he's not a superstar yet, he's just an all-star. But when you look at it, it's really hard to watch something like the NBA Finals, what he did there, and not call him a superstar, because it's very clear that his scoring, it's prone to take over a game at any time. And I've watched him enough to say, yes, he can do this on a consistent basis. So when you look at that one skill set that you need to be able to take over a game and change a game at any time, Kyrie Irving does have that. The big knock that people have on him is that, well, yeah, but what else does he do? As a point guard, he's not a great passer, he's not a great defender, and he's not really rebounding, so he's pretty much all scoring, but yet he's still at least on the fence of being an NBA superstar. You see how this gets blurry already? Because I know for a fact, even in the comment section, there's plenty of people who think he's a superstar, and then there's plenty of people who are going to say no, he just doesn't do quite enough. This same argument right now is going on for Carmelo Anthony, because he's aged, he's went through some injuries, and there's people out there really questioning his superstar status. There's no question that Carmelo Anthony definitely was an NBA superstar, but the big question is he still an NBA superstar? And again, there's still some people that think he is. There's people that look at him and say, again, look at his scoring skill set. He can still take over a game with his scoring at any point in time. But then pretty much the same argument comes into play as people start to ask, well, what else does he do? Because you know people love to rag on Carmelo Anthony's defense. A lot of people like to say he's selfish and that, you know, no team with him as the leader is really going anywhere. I can go through a list of negative things people say about Carmelo, yet his superstar status is still split pretty evenly down the middle amongst NBA fans. So anyways, I'm sure y'all have a good debate about that in the comment section. We're going to go ahead and move on to the second thing that I found. Something that I've seen a common argument amongst NBA fans is that the player needs to be able to lead a team to the playoffs or just win basketball games in general. This is probably most applicable to Kevin Love on the Minnesota Timberwolves, because again, he's split on people who said that he was an NBA superstar and amongst people who just say, yeah, he was just on a bad team. He was never really a superstar. But for me, I've always found it troubling that the argument says you have to be able to lead a team to the playoffs before someone can call you a superstar, because when I look back to Kevin Love's days in Minnesota, I always ask people, well, how was he supposed to lead that team to the playoffs in the West by itself? These were back in the days where if you won 50 games, you might be good enough to make a 7th or 8th seed in the Western Conference. You add that on to the fact that Kevin Love was injured all the time, his team was injured all the time. Just when they were starting to click, I think Rubio tore his ACL, and basically the whole time he was in Minnesota, they just could never really get anything going because, well, injuries. And for that reason, when he got traded to Cleveland, it became a popular thing to say, oh look, Kevin Love never did anything before LeBron, so he was never a superstar, he was just putting up good numbers. But again, I was just like, well, yeah, I just don't see how in the West he was supposed to lead that specific squad to a playoff berth. But when you look at the flip side of this argument, there's absolutely no question that winning does boost your chances of being called a superstar. I mean, because, well, that's just what superstar players do. Like when you look at Westbrook went out the year Kevin Durant won the MVP, and he did absolutely everything for that team. He was rebounding, assisting, scoring. I mean, he was the lifeline for the Thunder back then, and he kept them afloat without Westbrook. I think they made a 3rd seed, I'm pretty sure they got without him. Or you even look at a player like Paul George, who I believe most people consider an NBA superstar. Obviously, without Paul George, last year's Pacers roster, that roster wouldn't have went anywhere. You put him on there, and they almost defeated the Toronto Raptors. They took them 7, and Paul George just did what superstars do. He led that team, and, you know, he did what he could with that roster. Or you even go look at Chris Paul. Now, by no means has Chris Paul actually won anything of value in his career yet, but, well, he's won games and he's led his team to the playoffs, and I think that at least keeps people from saying he's not a superstar. I think that really helps his case. And then you go back to the other side of that, and the big question people have with Kyrie Irving is, what has he done without LeBron? These aren't my questions, by the way. These are just things I see all over the NBA atmosphere, I guess you could call it. Kyrie Irving hasn't really won a whole lot of games without LeBron, before he came back to the Cavaliers. And when LeBron goes out, they still don't win. So I don't know. Is he a superstar? You guys decide that. The third thing I've noticed amongst players that get called NBA superstars, and sadly it almost seems to be the most important, is that the player has to be able to be the face of the franchise. This entails being able to bring in ticket sales and just be a popular player overall. To me, this is probably the biggest thing that works against Kawhi Leonard when people have this type of argument, because a player like Kawhi Leonard is not going to draw in casual basketball fans to the game. Now, you have NBA super fans like me who love to watch him because he's shown he can score. He plays probably the best defense in the NBA. He's won Finals MVP. So a lot of people will say, yeah, Kawhi's an NBA superstar. But then there's another group of people who have, pretty valid concerns where they're just like, nah, I don't know if I can call Kawhi a superstar just yet. And I think what's going on in a lot of their minds is they're saying, well, is a casual basketball fan gonna jump at the name of Kawhi Leonard? Like, is Kawhi gonna draw everyone to come watch the game of basketball? Because there's no question that when you say a name like Kobe Bryant or Kevin Durant or Carmelo Anthony or Tracy McGrady back in the day, it doesn't matter how much of a fan someone is of the NBA. They're going to watch those type of guys play. When you think of Kawhi Leonard right now, you say that name and NBA super fans will get up and jump, but I'm not sure anybody else is getting up to jump for that. An example, me and my friend were just talking about this the other day, and we were like, well, what if you traded Carmelo Anthony for Kawhi Leonard? So say Kawhi Leonard played on the Knicks. Would they be nearly as popular? Because although Kawhi would probably impact that team more and maybe even make them a little bit better because he's a two-way player, how many people are coming out to watch Kawhi Leonard as the draw? And I'm not knocking on Kawhi Leonard, by the way. I'm just using him as an example for this point because as I look around arguments with what's an NBA superstar, I just happen to see this works against him the most. And if you're an NBA fan, I'm sure there's no question in your mind. You've seen it too. Just the face of the franchise thing, the whole popularity thing, a popularity contest, that really, it shouldn't have a lot to do with if a player is considered a superstar or not, but sadly I think we've seen time and time again, it really does. Speaking of Kawhi Leonard, I really think he has the perfect characteristic to make a segue into my next point, and I think a lot of people will call a player an NBA superstar if he's a great two-way player. To me, this might even be the most important part of it all because honestly, as I've looked around, it seems like when a player can do more than one thing at an elite level, he's almost a lock for being called an NBA superstar. However, I've definitely seen this work both ways because if a player can do one thing elite but he can't do the other thing, then people will say, oh, nope, he's not a superstar. I think the perfect example of this is James Harden because to me, he gets the most flack for being great at one thing and terrible at the other. Now, for me, there's no question James Harden is the superstar because I've seen him play. I mean, he can score, he can rebound, and he's a great playmaker. So to me, those are that's it. He can do it all. I think he's a superstar. But then there's the people that say, oh, well, James Harden, he's only great on the offensive side of the ball, but what you lose in defense is too significant. And this is also the same argument I hear for, again, Kyrie Irving, Carmelo Anthony, and then Damian Lillard as well. I haven't heard as many people call Damian Lillard a superstar, even though there's a group that really loves him. I haven't heard a lot of people use the actual superstar term yet, and people get on his defense as well, but people like him more, so they don't really, trash him for it. But anyways, yeah, there's absolutely no question. If you can play the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball at an elite level, there's no question. You're definitely a superstar there. I mean, we see guys like Chris Paul do it. And that's also the other thing. Like I said, this is where lines get blurry because Kawhi can do both great. He averages over 20 points and then he plays the best defense in the NBA. So then you start to look around at people and say, well, what makes him not a superstar then? And I actually posed that question to you. If you don't think Kawhi Leonard is a superstar, I want to know why. And I'm not, attacking. I just genuinely want to know because to me, that's a very blurry line right there. And I've seen that argument made for and against him. I've seen people who say, yeah, it's a no-brainer, he's a superstar. And then I've seen people say, nah, not quite yet. So that's definitely a good conversation to have in the comments. Now, the last thing that I've seen for a player to be called an NBA superstar really seems to be longevity. This one isn't as prominent, and it's actually, again, another blurred lines one. But again, as I look around and I study things and I hear what people say, this just seems to be what people like, and they like longevity in a player's career. But then again, there's the blurred line. I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. The only years in Derrick Rose's career that we can say he was an NBA superstar was his MVP year and then 2012. And in 2012 it gets hard to say because not only was that a lockout year, but he was injured too, so he barely even played that year. But I'm not gonna go off the deep end. Derrick Rose was a superstar for the time that he played in that 2012 season. But as far as longevity goes, I really think Derrick Rose is the last player you would mention when you talk about longevity. And Derrick Rose was not a superstar before his MVP year. Was he very good? Yes, and that's what made his MVP season so incredible, because the year before that, yeah, he was a good player. You know, when he challenged Boston in the playoffs that year, he was very good. When the next year when they played Cleveland, he was good, but he wasn't an NBA superstar just yet. That year when he busted out into the scene and won MVP, that's when people said, okay, yeah, this is the next NBA superstar. He was an all-star before that for sure, but you know, that season was the NBA superstar one. And while we can all agree that he was definitely a superstar for that short time because, well, you really can't win MVP without being a superstar, I think we can also agree that there has absolutely been no longevity to that because he hasn't been a superstar since then. However, again, like I said, these are blurred lines because when you use that for players that are superstars, yes, there has been longevity in all their careers. Look at players like Kobe and Shaq and Dirk Nowitzki, Kevin Garnett, LeBron James. I mean, the list just goes on. These guys dominated the league for many, many years. They weren't just flashes in the pan. You know, they didn't just have a good year and then fizzled out. They stayed superstars for pretty much the duration of their career. They might have taken some time to develop when they first got in the league, but they dominated for an extended amount of time. So people love longevity. And although, like I showed, sometimes shit just happens and it might not work out like it did with Derrick Rose, yeah, for the players that are superstars, they do have long, illustrious careers. Now that I've identified the 5 characteristics I believe that kind of pop up when people talk about players being NBA superstars, now what I'm going to do is go through the 30 NBA teams, and I'm just going to give some brief comments on the players that people argue are superstars and the ones that people argue aren't superstars. I'm just going to give a few comments on each because I don't want this to be a 30-minute video. If the player is questionable, I'm going to put a question mark next to him, and I'm going to give you guys a few comments on what I think to kind of get you guys started, because ultimately what I want you guys to do is leave in the comments your list of superstars, why you think certain players are superstars, and why you think certain players just don't make the cut. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get into this. For the LA Clippers, no question Chris Paul is a superstar. Two-way player, leader, can take over a game. Absolutely no debate there. We all know it. However, I've seen so many arguments for and against Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin has shown, yes, you know, he's an athletic freak and he can take over a game, but can he do it consistently? And if Chris Paul wasn't there, could he lead the Clippers to wins and or the playoffs? To be honest, I have no clue. So I'm putting a question mark there as to whether Blake Griffin is an actual NBA superstar or not. Going on to the Sacramento Kings, big question mark next to DeMarcus Cousins, because although people call him the best center in the game, I think there are huge questions about his attitude, his leadership, and will he ever be able to lead that dysfunctional Kings team anywhere? I obviously think he's going to get traded before that ever happens, and you know, it's kind of hard to not call the best big man in the game a superstar, but again, what is he really leading? Because so far he's really only just put up stats his entire career. Here's a fun one with the Golden State Warriors. Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, obvious superstars, no need to have a discussion there. However, I've seen so much debate on whether Klay Thompson and Draymond Green are superstars or not. Ooh, man, this is a hot one because this one is divided right down the middle. There's people who look at Draymond Green and say, yeah, he's just a system player and he just fits that team and he couldn't lead his own team anywhere. And then you look at Klay Thompson, a lot of people say he's just a catch and shoot guy, but damn, he can shoot that ball really well, and he's also plays defense too, so he has a compelling argument. To be honest with you, I don't believe those two players are superstars, but because there's people who do, I gotta put a question mark next to both of them and let you guys duke that one out. But just to let you guys know where I stand, I think Steph Curry and Kevin Durant are the only actual superstars on that team. Looking at the Oklahoma City Thunder, obviously Russell Westbrook is a superstar. I don't care what Mark Cuban said, and again, we don't need to talk about that one. I think everybody knows that. Damian Lillard is one of those players that's going to get a question mark because, again, you know, great player. He's improving every year. He had that Trailblazers team last year break so many expectations. They weren't supposed to be anywhere near the playoffs, but yet they did it, and he can clearly take over games. People are just getting on that defense, and I think people are waiting for him to progress a little bit more before they call him a superstar, but he gets the question mark treatment. Anthony Davis, obvious superstar. He just needs to stay healthy. That's the only thing with Anthony Davis is to stay healthy, but he's already gotten the Pelicans to the playoffs once. No question there. He's actually, coming into last season, he was in talks for maybe getting MVP if he could have stayed healthy. For James Harden, I've seen so many people question whether he's a superstar or not, but I'm not going to be one of them. I'm not putting a question mark there. I'm sorry. I mean, you guys get on his defense all you want, but this guy can take over a game. Not only can he take over with scoring, but didn't he also average like 7 rebounds and 7 assists to go with that, like 25 points a game or whatever he did? The guy's an amazing player. Get on his defense all you want. That's an NBA superstar. He could be the face of a franchise. If you go back and look through pretty much all 5 characteristics I listed in this video, James fits all of them, so no question mark for me there. We pretty much already talked about San Antonio. Kawhi Leonard, he gets the question mark there because although he does everything an NBA fanatic wants, there's still that question of that franchise face type thing with the popularity. There's a question mark there. I've already talked about him. LaMarcus Aldridge, you know, that's interesting because he's gotten caught up in the thing where he was playing in a team where he was featured in the offense more with the Blazers, and there was no question that in people's minds he was a superstar back then. Then he went to San Antonio where, you know, the system is to share the ball. No one player really shines there, and they have so many good players on that team that it's really like, well, he doesn't get to shine like he did, so is he still a superstar or not? So there's a question mark there. For the Bulls, to me, Dwayne Wade gets a big question mark because he still shows up when he needs to. You know, people got on him for being injured in Miami, but then last year he was relatively healthy. I don't even think he missed that many games last year. And then you look at what he did in the playoffs where he was almost able to beat the Raptors without Whiteside, without Bosh. I think he's kind of past the age where people want to call him a superstar, but he still shows up when he needs to. He just can't do it all season anymore, obviously, because of the age. So question mark there. Obviously on the Cavaliers, LeBron is a superstar. Kyrie Irving, for reasons we talked about earlier, I mean, the guy could have won Finals MVP. So to me, honestly, I count him as a superstar, but he's actually up there with Carmelo as one of the most conflicted players amongst the NBA fans I hear debating today. So he's got to get that question mark treatment. For the Pacers, Paul George, he's definitely a superstar. There's no question in my mind. I mean, come on. If the guy had any help last year, he would have been in the Eastern Conference Finals, coming off that broken leg, leading that team the way he does with the scoring, and he just affects so many things with the game. The guy's a two-way player, too. Great defender on top of being the superstar player on a team that did not have that much of a supporting cast last season. That's a superstar. I do want to give honorable mention to John Wall, but to be honest, I've never really heard anybody call John Wall a superstar yet. I've heard people call him an all-star, but I haven't even heard people start to debate superstardom with him yet. He is one of the best young point guards in the league. Hell, you could even call him one of the best players in the league, but I don't think he's actually a superstar just yet, and I just don't hear people debating as such. And again, the Knicks, you know, we've already had this conversation with Melo. People are very conflicted. Does Melo still have his top, you know, superstar status? I just saw the big debate where is he even still a top 15 player in the NBA? So I expect people to be debating the hell out of this one. On the Nets, we got Jeremy Lin. Oh my God, I'm just fucking with y'all. No, the Nets, oh my God, like, man, they got destroyed by Boston in that trade. What did they do? Like, I don't even recognize people in their lineup. Moving on. So, yeah, there goes the video. As you see this video, this is probably the toughest video I've ever had to make, just in terms of there's so many blurred lines in it. There's so many places where you can make an argument, but then you can make an argument against it. So what I want you guys to do now is to go in the comment section and really leave a bunch of things. What makes a player a superstar? Who are the superstars on your list? And yeah, just comment on anything in the video that I said that you want, and this should be pretty interesting because I've had this one on my mind for a while now, and I've been avoiding making this video because as you can see, this is a hard one to define, and I think people are going to be talking about it even past this year. People are still going to be trying to define it. People are going to disagree on who the superstars are, and it's just going to be an overall it's going to be a tough debate to have pretty much forever. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the comments. I'm Dom2K. And I'm sorry for my voice in this video. It probably cracked a bit. It probably dropped low at times just because I've been sick for a full week now and I feel weak and I'm coughing all throughout this video. I've had to make cuts and stuff like that. So yeah, if you noticed that, I'm sorry. But if you didn't, well, you know, good, whatever. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.